All right, now we are live for sure. The recording is in process. It's my pleasure then to welcome everybody to the August 19th regular board meeting of the Edmonton Metropolitan Transit Services Commission. And certainly the approval of today's agenda. And I want to make sure that we start off the meeting correctly. Do we have we can put up the land acknowledgement for me? That would be good. I don't have it handy here. My apologies. Want to make sure I got it right. I have it. I'd like to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 6 territory, traditional meeting grounds, gathering place, and traveling route of the. Okay, just wiped out my screen here. Let's try that again. I'd like to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional meeting grounds, gathering place, and traveling route to the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakudasot. We acknowledge all the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. And my apologies for not having that immediately available to us. So, board members, we have the agenda before us. I don't have any opening comments beyond that, other than welcome. And we have an agenda. If I could have a motion to approve the agenda.
I so move.
Thank you, Mayor Ray. Any comments, additions? Seeing none. Let's use the raise hand feature to indicate our votes. All in favor, please. And I see that as unanimous. Thank you very much. We have the agenda adopted as presented. I now am requesting a motion for the July the 22nd, 2021 regular board meeting minutes. Any errors or omissions? Councillor Walters, is that a motion to approve the minutes?
Let's say it is.
Okay, it is. Thank you very much, Councillor Walters. Hearing no errors or omissions, please indicate your approval of the minutes as presented. And again, I see that as unanimous. Thank you very much. For the first time, we have a consent agenda. And on the consent agenda is the CEO's memorandum dated the August the 19th, read the authority matrix update as distributed. Seeing that it's on the consent agenda, would one of the board members like to move the acceptance of the consent agenda or to exempt it for debate? Hearing none of that, could I entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Glenn here, I can do that for you.
Thank you very much. And again, indicating your approval by the raising hand feature, call the question to approve the consent agenda. And again, we see that as unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. That was the first time. And for those that were listening online, we've approved the authority matrix. It was to be reviewed within 6 months. It was reviewed, and there was no changes to the authority matrix. Hence, it was on the consent agenda motion. Moving right along, then, CEO update. Item number 5 on the agenda today. Over to you, Mr. Jankowski.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'll be very brief in terms of this CEO update.
work is progressing as it should in conformance with the plan that the board has seen in past meetings. We have had, with respect to the transit service planning work, we have had a number of individual meetings with all 8 municipalities to discuss the transit service planning for September 2022 start under the EMTSC umbrella. There was a group workshop that was held in the second week, I believe it was, or first week of August of this month. And that workshop then led to some additional input, some additional questions that were raised. We're working through many of those questions now, primarily with the city of Edmonton as it relates to the identification of the routes through Edmonton and into the city core and the other 3 high volume destinations within the city. We're working with Edmonton Transit staff to finalize our proposal with respect to the transit system planning work, reflecting the network as it might be considered for September of 2022. And as indicated in prior meetings, we're preparing to bring that forward to this board for consideration in the second week of September of this year. That will be the presentation of the draft, and I'll save any further comments until that time. If there's any questions on that, I will pause here.
Anyone on the board care to raise a question? Seeing none, carry on, Mr. Jankowski.
Thank you. So associated with that, the follow-on work, once we've identified the vital elements or critical elements of the transit system that we would be putting in place, we will also be revising the financial framework, and the board approved that approach a number of meetings ago. EY has now been also working with the financial folks at all of the municipalities. I think we've gotten most of the information now in from the finance departments with regards to what it is that's required to complete and wrap up a new financial outlook, which will then form the basis of the draft 2022 operating budget that we will be bringing forward. This work is intricately tied with the transit service planning. The presentation of the financial analysis will follow in late September and early October in conjunction with the planned presentation of the draft 22 budget in the second week of October to this board. So that work is now getting really underway. It's essentially now starting, given that some of the vital and critical elements from the system planning approach are now being completed. Again, we will get into much more discussion in the planned 2 meetings in September that we'll be discussing as part of the next agenda item.
Any questions? Okay, looking forward to the budget presentation. I suspect as we go through the meetings that we have planned on the next agenda, we'll hear more of that topic. So we'll have many opportunities to talk about this. So seeing none, carry on to the next item then, Mr. Jankowski. You need a motion here.
Please.
Fair enough. Someone care to make this motion?
No, go ahead, Councillor Walters.
Go ahead. Okay, so moved by Councillor Walters. Thank you very much. Any questions? Any debate? Councillor Walters? Seeing none, I'll call the question using the raise hand function. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone. Moving right along then. Item number 6. Again, this is over to you, Mr. Jankowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a significant item that we wanted to bring forward for the board's consideration and ultimately approval. You will have had distributed in the last day a decision note that sort of summarizes the information that we wanted to present to the board. What we're going to be requesting through the consideration of this item is a little more work, if I can put it that way, from the board. We've got a pretty aggressive agenda and a pretty aggressive list of issues that need to be considered prior to the end of this year. And you can see on the screen in front of you the critical meetings that we believe we need to have with the board in order to secure some necessary approvals and get the endorsement of the board for some foundational steps as we move into 2022. I've already spoken to the 2 meetings that will be required to, first of all, present the draft transit service plan for 2022, and then hopefully to finalize the transit service plan in reflection of the board's input at the first meeting. You see 2 dates suggested to you on the screen of September 9th and September 30th, and I must qualify that second date. And I take full responsibility for this. This is on me. We set that date and we proposed it to the board without consideration of the fact that that is the new national statutory holiday that has been identified, the Day of Truth and Reconciliation. So what we would propose ultimately, when you see the motion in front of you, that the motion that you see worded is actually revised to reflect the fact that we will work towards establishing an alternate day for that meeting in the last week of September or in the first week of October. But moving beyond that, what we also propose is that at the previously scheduled October 14th board meeting, that meeting is already in your calendars. That will be a key meeting as we move forward, because that's really the meeting at which we anticipate we'll be ready to propose and put in front of the board consideration of the draft 2022 budget. But that date will be immediately prior to a date that I'm sure is well ingrained in all your minds in terms of the municipal election that follows the following week. That election will necessitate a formal board orientation session, which we are proposing for November 4th, for the first week in November. And then what we also are obliged to carry out under the governance bylaw that has established this organization, or that has formalized the workings of this organization, we need to host and hold an organizational meeting prior to December 15th. What we're proposing is to combine the organizational meeting along with a request for approval of the final 2022 budget to occur on the previously scheduled November 18th date that's already in many of your calendars as you move forward. Last but not least, we do have a final date that's already also been scheduled and is in your calendars for the December meeting of December 16th. So those are the meetings that we are suggesting that we need to have with you as our directors, as our oversight in order to finalize these critical pieces of foundational work for 2022. You have the decision note beside you, and I apologize again for the misstep in terms of not recognizing that there is a vacation or a statutory holiday that has been scheduled for September 30th, but we will work to amend that date.
All right. Any questions, Councillor Monkoff-Swain?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and appreciate the recognition of September 30th. Thanks for the catch on that, Paul. The question that I had was just the involvement, recognizing we're a board here, but just the involvement in those conversations for the individual municipalities and that sort of stuff. What is the coordination in order to be able to get there? Is administration here going to be, connecting with our individual municipalities prior to and bringing the draft, and then it's just the board meeting there, or is there going to be advice? I was just curious how that's going to work with our administrations.
Thank you. So yes, we actually have one more workshop, two more workshops scheduled. we've had two workshops. We've got one final workshop scheduled for the week prior to the presentation of the draft 22 transit service plan. So in that first week of September, the week prior to Labor Day, we do have a meeting scheduled to discuss what we're going to be bringing forward, essentially to do a dry run of the material that we will be presenting to the board on September 9th. We will be sharing all of that information with the transit representatives in all of the municipalities in order to help provide them with the information to inform you as members from those respective municipalities. Our hope is that we're going to be able to achieve consensus. However, I do know that there are some elements where there continue to be some minor differences of opinion on, not so much on the local service side in the 7 municipalities outside of Edmonton, but in terms of some of the discussion around the prioritization of the intermunicipal or the regional service that we would put in place on day 1 in September of 2022. So we will be sharing that information. That information is something that your administrative units can consider and provide the whatever feedback or input that you would require with respect to your consideration of the elements that are important to your municipality.
Thanks for that. Another question, Chair, if that's okay.
Fair enough.
I wonder if you could just help me understand we're going through the transit service plan, and you're looking for us to finalize that, but clearly that has a significant impact on the budget, and maybe it's not the 2022 budget. So I'm just curious how we could look at essentially given the green light for a final 2022 transit service plan without having a conversation at the budget. It just strikes me that it's strange that they're not at the same time. So I'm sure there's a reason behind it, but I wonder if you could just help me understand how we can make a decision on a final plan without signing off on the budget.
Thank you. So what we'll be bringing forward to the board for consideration is admittedly kind of a high level or a 25,000 foot plan that will really look at the key network elements that will be considered for the intermunicipal travel. The work and then that high level plan will be used to develop the financial proposal, the draft budget proposal that we will bring forward subsequent to that on October 14th. Once we have a good idea of what the financial impacts of that 25,000 foot plan will be, and we establish a budget that identifies funding sources and matches them up with expected expenditure totals for 2022 and beyond, then we will actually sit down with the local municipalities and we will get into the detailed service planning. That work will be undertaken in the first and second quarter of 2022, and will lead then to actually the distribution and the communication of the detailed service plans in the summer of 2022 for September 2022 start. The reality is, with the very tight timeline, with the short runway between now and September of 2022, we just were not in a position to carry out all of that detailed service planning work and bring forward a financial outlook by the end of this year. That detailed work that we're talking about having and undertaking in the first 2 quarters of 2022 will demand a lot more attention, but it will be guided, provided that the board is comfortable with setting an agenda or setting a budget for 2022. It will be guided by the financial constraints that we have in that budget. It will take the available funding and distribute it appropriately to the various elements of that regional network, the connections between the 7 municipalities and the ultimate destinations in the core. What we'll be bringing forward to you for consideration in September, in early September, will be things like foundational elements for that transit service plan. So, for example, and just to give you an example, a network objective of connecting perhaps from each municipality to each one of those 4 key high high ridership destinations like the post-secondary institutions, like the downtown core, with only one transfer point or with only 2 transfer points. Those are the elements that we'll be bringing forward for the board's consideration in early September, but a lot of the detailed work will have to follow in the early part of 2022. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you very much. I appreciate the explanation, and I got no further questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Great questions, Councillor Malcolm-Swain. Councillor Finstead.
Thank you. My only comment was going to be, it's going to be extremely difficult to plan what the budget should be or could be if we don't know what the service plan requirements are going to be. So I realize that they're both tied very closely together. But for me, it just makes absolute sense that we would work on the service plan before the budget, because doing the budget first might restrict or constrain the actual service plan that is needed. So I concur wholeheartedly with the direction that the Mr. Jankowski is taking.
If I may, if I may just comment on that, one thing that I sort of neglected to mention is that the reason why we're working so closely with many of your finance people is that we recognize that for the first 8 or 9 months of 2022, all of the transit services that are going to be in place are going to be reflected in the budgets that you are all going to consider within the context of your municipal operations. We are working with those same budgetary constraints that your finance people, that your transit people are working with within each one of your municipalities. And one of the things that we're trying to line up is to make sure that at least in the initial transition, that we don't deviate, or that we work with essentially the same financial framework, the same overall financial constraints, municipality by municipality. So we absolutely need to consider not only potentially new transit service elements, but the funding for those has to be aligned with what it is that your municipalities are considering for at least the 2022 budget for transit within each one of your locations, your municipal boundaries.
Thank you for that, Mr. Jankowski. So I guess the conclusion that we can draw then is that the budget that the board will be considering is that the cost drivers that make up that would not be a mystery to our municipalities. They'll be involved in that conversation, and they'll understand the budget, irrespective of the fact that we in fact approved the budget for the commission here. It's not an unknown to them, I guess is my comment. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions before we move along? So just around September 30th, then, Mr. Jankowski, so we'll approve the motion that you have that you're going to present to us here.
Yeah.
Assuming that approval is, and then you'll work for an alternate date for the 30th, is that?
Yeah, if I can just suggest an amendment that rather than specifying September 30th, 2021, we just specify something like last week of September 2021.
Okay, so the recommendation that I received here says that the board approve changes to the September through December 2021 board meeting schedule as per attachment 1.
You see in front of you on the screen a board motion, a suggested board motion, and we would propose that we simply modify that second bullet point.
Okay. Who would care to make that motion?
I would, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Go ahead.
That the board approve the updated board meeting schedule from September 2021 to the end of December 2021, as presented in the report, with the amendment that September 30th meeting will be scheduled sometime in the last week of September.
Okay. Well, certainly accept that motion. We'll probably want to, do we actually need to see that? We understand the intent, Mr. Shores, is there a problem here if we just do it verbally?
I'm trying to unmute myself. Sorry, there is not.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Appreciate that. So is there all board members understanding the motion then? Any opening comments then, Ms. Councillor Harris?
No, I think it's good that we get on this now so that we can get this in our calendars. I presume that administration will then send out updated invites and they'll all appear in our calendars accordingly. I'm notorious for deleting things in error, so I will defer to them to make sure our calendars are pristine. But I think this is good, and the comments that have foreshadowed going to these meeting schedule relative to service plan and budget, I think it's definitely apropos. And I think it's a big part of what we're going to be doing over the next little while.
Thank you very much. Any other board member on debate? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Councillor Harris and Mr. Jankowski on this presentation. Again, using the raise a hand function, I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion as amended? And that would be unanimous. I'm Councillor Walters, sorry, I don't see your hand, but there you go. Thank you very much. And the motion is approved unanimously. Thank you. All righty. The next item on the agenda then, Mr. Jankowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So included in that same decision note, there is a second recommendation, and it pertains to the direction that the board provided 2 meetings ago with respect to the desire to hold meetings from September on in a hybrid format. And by what we mean by that description, the hybrid format, a format that would allow attendance both in person and virtually. We have worked with to gain some knowledge of how that could be done. We've also worked with some of our sister agencies, most notably with the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board, the EMRB. Actually, some of our staff attended a recent EMRB meeting that was carried out in this fashion, and we spoke to the provider of the technology that allowed for that meeting to go off virtually flawlessly. The EMRB procured the services of Infinite Event Services through a competitive process. And certainly after observing the successful conduct of that meeting a couple of weeks ago, we are bringing forward a recommendation that in order to allow us to carry out the meetings that we spoke about a little bit earlier, the board meetings, to carry those out in a hybrid format between now and the end of the year, we are proposing to retain the services of Infinite Event Services. The cost is approximately $6,000 per meeting, and that cost is not inclusive of the actual venue rental costs, but they do reflect the costs and reasonable costs based on our discussions with some of the other procurers and some of the other agencies that have sought to procure such services. They represent a reasonable cost for provision of this technical support. We would propose to do this only for the board meetings themselves. We would propose that the other committee meetings that still remain to be held over the course of the rest of 2021 continue to be held in a virtual format. We have the financial wherewithal to actually include or pay for the retention of Infinite Event Services for the remainder of the board meetings this year. We can find room in the approved budget, but we will be revisiting this with the board as part of the draft 2022 budget. And we'll look at the ramifications of using this approach not only for the board meetings, but potentially as well for the the committee meetings in 2022. There are certain sort of benefits to going this way. There are certain implications of not going with a hybrid format that should be considered by the board. But most importantly, the financial outlook is also an important consideration. So we would defer consideration for the time period beyond the end of 2021. We would defer that, or suggest deferring that, to the discussions about the draft 2022 budget. So in front of you, you see a motion that seeks your approval, a draft motion that seeks your approval for the procurement of services from Infinite Event Services at that $6,000 per meeting cost.
Thank you, Mr. Jankowski. Mayor Ralph. Comments?
Apologize, I had my mic muted because of my dogs. Sorry about that.
All right.
Just a quick question in regards to our purchasing policy and when it comes to buying, do we not have, again, this is all new, but do we not have to put this out to RFP, even if it's only for short term?
So I do have some discretion under the purchasing policy and under the authority matrix. I think in this case, what we're also cognizant of is that given that our sister agency, or a sister agency like the EMRB, went through a competitive procurement process that resulted in this provider being selected at the lowest cost, and that happened relatively recently. I believe that we meet the spirit of, certainly the spirit of the competitive procurement provisions. And I am suggesting that for purposes of getting this kind of support within the time frame that we need it for, that this is an appropriate way to go forward. I'd be happy to have Bill Shores chime in on that as well.
Bill, do you want to comment?
Just need to unmute myself and start my video. My apologies. It always takes me a while. Yes, so the procurement policy does sort of follow the trade agreements. In small procurements, I'm not sure what the gross amount of this will be. And urgent procurements, there's more flexibility. So it seems to me that this is a limited time procurement to the end of the year. Paul, what is the maximum expenditure likely under this?
$36,000 to $40,000. So it's very small in comparison to what is stated in those trade agreements.
So my recommendation would be that as we move forward, that sort of the sister agency exception, if we're gonna use it, we should probably build it into the policy rather than have it informally. But certainly on an urgency and small number basis, I think the flexibility with board approval would be acceptable.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shores. I appreciate that. Does that answer your question then, Mayor Ralph?
It does, Mr. Chair, but the only thing I would like to see then is the wording added in there to a maximum amount of dollars, rather than just 6,000 per meeting, because again, it's kind of a generic, we don't know. So I would like to see a maximum dollar amount. That's the only question I have. Thanks.
Fair enough. Would you propose, say, a $50,000 maximum, or what would you suggest?
Mr. Chair, so I recommend that you go under 40.
Under 40?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would possibly then I recommend approximately like $39,000. That way it's under the $40,000 limit. And it should give Mr. Jankowski the opportunity to move ahead with this. So
It does. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Harris?
I just needed to triangulate on the reasons for this. Is it just as a result of post-COVID meeting protocols and that sort of stuff, or do we see this as something that ultimately is going to allow board members to go to Whistler in January and still participate in a board meeting virtually? I mean, what's the genesis of this?
So this reflects the direction that the board provided 2 meetings ago
Okay.
in order to consider carrying out the hybrid type approach. It does allow for those people that during the continuation of the current pandemic, those people that might have reservations of participating in a group format or participating in person, it does allow them to connect into these meetings and participate in these meetings going forward. So it does accomplish that. It's certainly not the intent from my perspective to allow for long distance participation. That wasn't the intent. I don't believe that the board had considered when it provided its direction to staff 2 meetings ago. I think it is simply now a question of us bringing forward this suggestion to help us carry out these meetings in sort of this joint or hybrid format till the end of the year. And as I said before, we would certainly bring forward to the board as part of the draft budget discussion, bring forward any alternate approaches that the board may wish to consider or that we may wish to suggest for going beyond the December of 2021 date.
Thank you for that reminder and cycling back to the reason for doing it. Obviously, I think it's probably prudent in the circumstances to the end of the year. And I don't know where we're going to go with meetings in the future. Our city is in the middle of just dealing with the implementation of completely new technology, probably in line with the stuff that Infinite is sponsoring to be able to do that. But I think what we will likely see is council members potentially being remote for more than one meeting from time to time. So if we've got that flexibility for now, and then going forward, we have a more fulsome discussion as to how we will actually conduct board and committee meetings in the long haul, I think that would be a good discussion to have at that point. And if that's on the docket, I'm happy with that.
Fair enough, Councillor Harris. Thank you. Councillor Pinstad?
Thank you very much. And I'm glad to see that this policy is in place. So although not its intent, I will be out of town conferences for both of those September dates. So I'm glad we're able to accommodate me. And the 2 conferences were booked prior to realizing that these were going to be conflicts with transit, because both of these dates are kind of outside of our normal rotation for board meetings. So whether the intent was to accommodate me or not, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, appreciate that. One of the things that modern technology allows us to do is to entertain these sorts of meetings and provide the flexibility for people to be in a different location, be it for personal reasons or business reasons. Quite honestly, we're all engaged in various activities supporting our municipalities, or if we're part-time, our own business requirements. So I believe what will happen here is that and we'll have a discussion later on around what our home facilities are like for the commission, but ultimately we may want to establish our own facilities that have the technology to enable us to do this. And rather than 6,000 per meeting, the cost would certainly diminish, because part of the 6,000, of course, is to rent the equipment to be able to produce this hybrid type meeting. And once we get into our own facilities, we'll endeavor to have our own technology that will allow us to do that. So it won't always be this, as I understand it. Is that correct, Mr. Jankowski?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We certainly will be discussing this further in the context of further facility discussions, as well as the 2022 draft budget presentation.
Fair enough. All right. So we have any further questions before we enter into approval of this motion? Seeing none, would someone care to move this motion then? Mayor Ray?
with an amendment to adding to a maximum dollar amount of $39,000.
Okay. So then the motion would read, the board direct the CEO to procure the services of Infinite Event Services as required at a cost of up to $6,000 per meeting to a maximum amount of $39,000 to support the conduct of the building board meetings through December 21st. Is that what you suggested, Mayor
Yeah.
Ralph?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any opening comments then, Mayor Ralph?
No, I think this is, this gets us through the end of the year. And again, I liked your comments about, we get into our own facility and looking at purchasing our own equipment or something. And I think, we could even probably take that a step a little bit further when you consider that we're just another part of the Edmonton metropolitan region. So, if the MRB is paying $6,000 a meeting for this equipment, then maybe, again, we could be looking at on a regional basis of looking at some, putting, investing into this asset for us as a regional. So, I think there's opportunities in the future. Thanks.
Yeah, agreed. Any other board member on debate? Seeing none, then using the raise a hand feature, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? And I see that as unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone. And that's approved. So you got your marching orders in that respect, Mr. Jankowski.
Thank you, sir.
All right. All right. So we're at the end of our public portion of the meeting. And we now require a motion to go in camera for the next portion. Someone would like to read this in. Was that you, Councillor Finstad?
It was. So I move the board move in camera in accordance with provisions of Division 2, exceptions to disclosure of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, or FOIP, RSA 2000 F25 as per section 16 through 28.
Let me call the question using the raise the hand function. Indicate whether we would like to convene in camera. And just waiting for Mayor Ralph and okay. And that's unanimous. So we'll give you a couple of minutes here. I didn't, sorry, Ray.
It was through the chat here.
Oh, geez. Okay, I got it now. Thanks. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll be done by 3 for sure. If not, thanks for the heads up.
Okay.
All right, thanks. All right. All right, we're all back. So we're reconvening in public. And we are now in, we've passed this motion, Agata, that the board reconvene in public. So we can go on to the next one. Okay, can I get a motion to accept as information our discussions? Thank you, Councillor Finstad. Would you care to read it, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the board accept as information the material and discussion as presented in camera.
Thank you very much. Any opening comments?
None needed. It was a great discussion and look forward to moving on to the next phase.
Excellent. Any comment? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, before we adjourn, Councillor Walters, I'll turn the meeting over to you.
Yeah, so I just, thanks Wes, thanks everybody. So last thing, I just wanted to announce very briefly today that this will be my last EMTSC board meeting. As many people know, I'm not running again and moving into a different line of work starting later this fall after my term is done. In order to avoid any conflict of interest that may be perceived, I've stepped down as a board member, and council earlier this week has appointed Councillor Andrew Knack as the City of Edmonton's representative effective Friday, August 20th, which is tomorrow, until the end of this council term. And then at that point, when the city, like you all, will have your organizational meetings shortly after the election, and the new board will be selected. But for the last 2 meetings, Councillor Knack will be the City of Edmonton representative. So it's been an honor to serve with you all. Wes, thank you for your leadership through this whole time. It's been absolutely amazing. That was an unfortunate interruption. It's been incredible to work with you. Your leadership has brought us here really, and guidance, so thank you. And to every other member of this board and all the municipalities that decided to take a risk and build this commission. You deserve a ton of respect and recognition, and to all the administration support, and to Paul, good luck. And hopefully I'll be around to help out in whatever ways I can in the future. So that's that. Thanks, everybody.
Well, on behalf of the board, Michael, I wish you all the best. Thank you for your dedication and your service to the City of Edmonton and to the region and to public transit in the region in particular. Your contributions were invaluable. Your wisdom and your discretion and your perseverance are key to making this all a success. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And seeing if there is nothing else on the agenda, and let me then motion to adjourn.
I will, in my final act, move to adjourn this meeting.
And we will accept that motion. Councillor Walters, thank you so much. All in favor of adjournment of Councillor Walters' last motion? It is unanimous.
As usual. All right.
As usual.
Take care.
Alrighty.
Take care, Michael.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Best
Bye.
wishes, Michael. Take care, everyone.
See you soon, Mike.
Bye.